And we are live. Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to She Built It Boss Lady Chronicles. I am Dr. Sharita Gaskins-Tillett. I am your host, and this is the show where we feature the amazing stories of extraordinary women who are owning their power to transform their lives. And I am super excited about tonight's guest. She was on the previous show, Level Up Live, but I'm really excited to have her back because she has some new things going on in her life and in her world. And I can't wait to share those things with you. Also, though, we'll just wait a few minutes for folks to come in. And while they are, happy December. Welcome to the last month of the year. Also, want to extend an invitation. I will be hosting a brunch and vision board party. So, for folks who are here in the DMV, there will be a brunch and vision board party on Saturday, January 4th at 11 a.m. in Severn, Maryland. So if you are interested, I'm going to put the link in the comments. You can reach out to me by DM to get the details. If you are watching us live, please say hi in the comments. Put your questions in the comments. We're happy to answer questions. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay. Still put your comments and questions in the comment section. We will be happy to answer those. So without further ado, I am going to introduce tonight's guest. So I have joining me tonight Dr. Nicole Rochester. Dr. Nicole is a pediatrician. She's the owner of a successful healthcare consulting company, a riveting keynote and TEDx speaker, and the mom of two beautiful young adult daughters. From the outside, she appeared to have it all. But in 2023, she faced the most difficult challenge of her life, ending a 28-year marriage and navigating heartbreak, deception, and loss. A recovering perfectionist, and the proverbial strong friend, Dr. Nicole experienced a transformational journey of healing by embracing vulnerability and discovering the power of her community. Rooted in her faith, Dr. Nicole is committed to creating a safe space where other women who have experienced a divine disruption can heal, recover, and thrive. As the host of Your Next Chapter podcast, Dr. Nicole shares insights from her own journey and cultivates meaningful conversations with experts, thought leaders, and women who are thriving in spite of and because of life's challenges. Welcome, Dr. Nicole. How
Thank
are you?
you, Dr. Sharita. I am well. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. The pleasure is all mine. Now, one thing I did not did I miss in there about the podcast? Did you say was the podcast listed in there?
Yeah, you mentioned it.
Okay, I did. Okay, all right. I
Yep.
felt like I didn't. All right. So, welcome. Happy to have you back. Um, I usually like to start just by asking my guests to take us through their journey. And I know we're talking, not so much about career tonight as we are about life, but I think it's all kind of intertwined. So why don't we start a little bit with, your journey, where
Sure.
you started. You mentioned that you're a pediatrician. You also
Mhm.
own a healthcare consulting company. Talk to us about that, and then transition us to the point of what appears to me having the rug pulled out from under you.
That's a good description, Dr. Sharita. Yes, so I am a pediatrician by training. I have wanted to be a pediatrician since I was a little girl and was able to fulfill that dream and practice pediatric medicine for almost 20 years. For the first few years as a primary care physician, and then I transitioned to the hospital setting. And in that hospital-based career, really was living, what I thought was my dream life from a career perspective. I was teaching medical students and residents. I was the medical director, so I had some administrative responsibilities. And of course, I was providing clinical care. So it was great. I loved my job. And that first pivot in my career came in 2017 when I left clinical medicine to start a healthcare advocacy and consulting firm. Initially started out as advocacy, and that was birthed from a caregiving journey with my late father, and really just recognizing how difficult, challenging, stressful, traumatic, all the words,
Mhm.
how it is navigating the healthcare system and just frankly getting the care that you need and deserve. And when my sisters and I were caring for my dad, all of us were regularly having to step in and speak up and pushback. And of course, being a physician who was very accustomed to working in hospital settings, it was, easy for me to do that. But I kept thinking about the fact that if it's this hard for even my family, how much harder must it be for people who don't have a medical professional in the family, and particularly people who look like me and you.
Yes.
And so initially, I started my company and I was working one on one with patients and family caregivers, teaching them about healthcare, the system, their medical conditions, helping them understand their medications, helping them to communicate more effectively with their medical team, sometimes me directly advocating for them. And that was amazing. I still can't believe it's been 7 years since I did that.
Wow.
Never having planned to be an entrepreneur, never having planned to stop practicing medicine. And so I've been doing that, and that morphed from one on one advocacy to really advocating for patients and families at the systems level. So now I do a lot more consulting with hospitals and healthcare organizations. And so that has been awesome. I have also had the chance to do a lot of public speaking in that realm, just educating and talking about mostly health equity, health disparities. So that's been an amazing journey. And then to your point about the rug being pulled out, on a personal basis, as you mentioned in my intro, I am the mom of two young adult daughters. They are currently 24 and 29. And I had been married to my high school sweetheart. We had started dating when I was 17 and he was 18. And we got married when I just shy of my 25th birthday. And so we were married for 28 years, together for 36 years. And to make a very long and sordid story short, I found out a lot of things last year that really just completely rocked my world, completely caused me to take a look, second, third, fourth, and fifth look at what I believe to be true for all of my adult life,
Okay.
and ultimately led to me filing for divorce.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah.
One thing that I notice about you, we'll get back to this part of the story, but one thing that I noticed, I just wanted to highlight, is that you really seem to take stock of where you are and pull out the lessons and the blessings in it. When I was listening to you talk about the journey with your dad, some people could have just thought, many people would have just gone through that and kept going, but you went through it and you thought, okay, there's a way that I can help to make this kind of journey better for other people, because if we are experiencing these kinds of challenges, and I think one of your sisters is also in healthcare, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
so if we are experiencing these kind of challenges, what about regular lay people? And so I love that you take your challenges and make them something that you can use to help other people. And so that's what you're doing now, right? So
Yeah.
you ended this 28-year marriage because of some things that went on. Um, how did you get from there to where you are today, though? Because so
Whew.
many people, you go through something like that, you're just on the floor, right? So
Mhm.
tell us how you got off the floor and how you got to the point of being here and having this wonderful podcast. If you guys get a chance, please listen to the podcast. It is absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank
It's a
you.
wonderful podcast, so please check it out. But how did you get from there to where you are now? And we're only talking like a year, right? Because you said
Yeah, it's
2023.
it's
So
been
it's not
yeah.
like you had a long time to get yourself together. So tell us about
Mhm.
this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just thank you for acknowledging that. I am a Christian, and so I have to say that I really can't take a lot of credit. I mean, yes, I'm the physical body doing the work, but when it comes to my other company and certainly this new venture, your next chapter, it really is me saying yes. Like this is all part of like a long surrender journey, and me really just be listening and being open to being used. And so, certainly with the divorce, like you said, I mean, definitely there were many moments on the floor, lots and lots of tears. And, honestly, I'm still healing. But what I would say is that in the very beginning, like literally within the first couple of weeks of me just being completely devastated, I could feel in my spirit that this was going to be used somehow. I didn't know how, but I knew that this was going to be used. And so I just started praying about that. And that became part of my regular daily prayers, like as I'm asking God to like protect me and heal me and restore me and all of those other things, I was like, God, please show me how you're going to use this. And honestly, in the beginning, I was angry at God. Like, God, I know, I know you did not allow me to stay in this marriage for this many years in the dark. And that was what I was hearing. It's like, basically, like, just relax. Like, I got you. I've
Right.
always had you. I
Yep.
still have you.
All things work
So
together.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite verses. So yeah, so I just had to stay in that belief. And so if there's a kind of a funny story about the name, but and you can hear that on the podcast, you all, if you listen to episode 4 with Dr. Salika. But essentially I knew that I was going to be used in some way, but I didn't know how. And as I was planning a freedom party, not to celebrate divorce, but to celebrate this new season of my life, Salika and I were together at a spa, and we were basically trying to think of the name for the signature drink, which became the name for the party, which was Nicole's Next Chapter. And so fast forward, that was in March of this year. And then fast forward, I think it was about 2.5 weeks after the podcast, I just kind of like got this spiritual download. And it was like, that's the name of your next venture. It's going to be Next Chapter. And I kept hearing like next chapter, next chapter. And then I said, wait, it's your next chapter. So that's kind of what led to the name. But initially, I still didn't know, what is your next chapter? Like, okay, God, you're
Right.
telling me your next chapter, but like, what is it? And then from there, it became like, okay, it's going to be a podcast. So there's a lot more other things planned that I can't talk about yet, but we're
Yeah.
starting with the podcast.
All right, because that's where I was going. What's coming next? Because you've hinted. I listened to the podcast, and you've hinted that this is going to be more of a movement
Yeah.
than an episode, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, but again, I think it's very necessary because so many women experience the things that you've experienced, and they get paralyzed and they get stuck. They think it means something about them,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't realize their power. And again, that's one of the things, we talked about with Boss Lady Dream Builders and the things that I do. I want to help women to recognize their inherent power to change
Yes.
their lives. And so, that's one thing that I really admire about you, that you recognize that you had the power to do something different. How were you able to harness that power? What did that look like? Because again, so many people experience the things that you've experienced, but they don't make the decisions that you made. So
Yeah.
how can you help someone else to see a different way?
I think one thing that I had to come to grips with, Dr. Sharita, is that in my heart of hearts, I knew some things. And I think my coach says a woman always knows. That's one of the things that my
Mhm.
coach says. And so I had to really sit and unpack and unravel, what I thought I knew, what I believed, what I didn't want to believe. Even when I may have been told something otherwise, you kind of know in your gut. And so one thing that I have realized during this healing journey is that um, there were things that I was accepting, allowing, believing, that in my spirit and my, that intuition that we often, especially as doctors or high
Right.
achievers or
Yes.
scientists, we want to, if we don't have evidence sometimes, and we're like, well, I guess, it's not true. And so part of the journey for me in terms of like recognizing my power and making a decision was really coming to grips with reality. I had romanticized reality, which is a term that I learned from Patrice Washington, who is a podcast that I listen to. And when you've been married that long, you really buy into the dream, the fantasy, and this desire to have the fairy tale and things like that. And I truly loved my husband, and so I wanted it to work very badly. But when I really was faced with, just clear evidence that this is not a healthy, committed relationship, then I had to really do an inventory. And from there, honestly, the decision for me, I know, like you said, not everybody makes that decision, but for me, it was like a very clear decision. There was absolutely no wavering once I had the evidence that my heart probably already knew.
Mhm.
Then it was a no-brainer, but it wasn't easy by any means. And that's where I really credit my community. And like you said, we talk about that a lot on the podcast because I had to be vulnerable. You mentioned in my intro, I'm the proverbial strong friend. You probably have a lot of strong friends listening.
Yes.
So another part of me harnessing my power was honestly like relinquishing it at first. Like I had to let it go in order to really get it back, if that makes sense. And I had to be vulnerable and I had to share my story. And my village just like came out of nowhere. I mean, I've always had, close friends who, of course, were there for me. I have sisters and other family members, but what surprised me is in addition to the people that I knew would be there for me, I would maybe share some cryptic message on Facebook. Early on, I wasn't saying like, I'm going through a divorce. But if you go back and look at my Facebook post, you're like, oh, yeah, she was going through something. And like distant friends or people that were in my quote unquote outer circle started reaching out and just in a beautiful, beautiful way. And it showed me that, one, I'm not alone, but also, like you were mentioning, I realized that many women, when they're going through divorce or other unexpected life transitions, we feel like we have to do it alone, especially if you have been revered or if you have been put on a
Yes.
pedestal or people look at your life and think, oh, she has this great life. And so it's like now you have to pull, the mask off. So that was another part of my journey is really being vulnerable and allowing other people to help me, which I was not used to. I'm used to being the helper,
Right,
being the
right.
problem solver, the fixer. And I allowed my amazing friends and family to be that for me. And now I want to be that for other people because I've learned that there are a lot of women who suffer in silence
Yes.
and don't feel like they can talk about it for so many different reasons. And I mean, this is such a like nobody should go through this alone. I don't care if you've been married 2 years or 20 years. Like this is just, it's not an experience that I would wish on anyone and nobody should go through this alone.
But I think that, and you talk about the strong friend kind of syndrome. But I don't even know if it's just the strong friends. I just think that the way that our society is, we do go through things alone because, fear of disappointing people, fear of being embarrassed, ashamed, whatever it
Yeah.
is, we don't want to share what's going on with us, and we don't really form real communities a lot of the time. And so, it's great that you were able to get that support that you needed. So many people don't reach out and don't get the support. Now, one thing that you mentioned or that you said kind of made me think about identity because I
Mm.
know that at least I imagine I'm married and I know your identity gets kind of caught up in that title
Mhm.
of wife and in that image of family and other things. And I know even with other kinds of transitions, how were you able to maintain your identity, or did you not have an identity crisis of any kind as you went through this?
That's such a great question. And now that you ask it and I'm reflecting because one of the things I've been thinking about, Dr. Sharita, is how I've been prepared for this devastating moment, and I can look back and see how, oh, okay, that's why that happened. And so
Mhm.
for me, I would say that pivot that we talked about earlier, where I went from being I mean, I'm always going to be a physician, right? I'm always
Sure.
going to be a pediatrician, but the further I get away from it, it's like, do I even still have that street cred, of being a
Right,
doctor?
right.
So for that was a moment where I really did have, I would say, a little bit of an identity crisis, where it's like, wait, am I still a pediatrician? Like, am I still a doctor? And what does it look like for me to not practice medicine anymore? And so now I can see that I believe that was preparing me for this identity shift. And so I will say, I was a wife for 28 years. And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a crisis, only because, frankly, you know, how do I put this? The even though I was still married, I will say that the marriage was not in the last few years what it should have been, what it could have been. And in many ways, not even a traditional marriage, so to speak. And so I feel like even before I was divorced, I was already divorced, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So for that reason, I think it was more the identity, not necessarily the title, but the hopes. I think that's the crisis that I had, because even when things were not the way I wanted them to be, I was still holding on to hope, like literally until almost the very, very end. And so that was, I think, letting go of that, my hopes and my dreams. I had imagined us literally as old people sitting on a porch,
Right.
sipping lemonade and holding hands and all those things you see. I'd imagined like literally growing old with this person. And so I think in terms of an identity crisis for me, it was less of like, I'm a wife or I'm a Mrs., and more of like all of these hopes and dreams that I had held on to.
Yeah. So what do you see for your future now?
Oh man, I don't know. And I think that's the space that I'm in, and I'm actually shockingly comfortable being here. This divorce and a lot of other things, but I would say the divorce more than anything else has really forced me to be in the present.
Mm,
And because, when you're going through a divorce, there's so many things. I mean, there's legal, there's financial, there's emotional, psychological, like there's all these things, spiritual. And if you get caught up in what may be or what may happen or what's down the road, you can literally drive yourself crazy. And so I really had to learn how to be in the present and just focus on the next step, the next thing. And so that's kind of been my way of living, my way of moving, whether it's business, whether it's personal. Is just like, okay, like what's the next thing that I need to do? So like even with the business, with your next chapter, I knew it was going to be more than just a podcast. So I went and filed a formal business entity. But it's still unfolding, and
yeah.
my life is still unfolding. So I'm just open to, whatever God has for me. I am not a blank slate, but there's a part of me that's a blank slate. And I'm just, living life day to day, and really in anticipation and excitement. I mean, I think where I am right now is I'm at peace. I have joy, and I just am in anticipation of all of the amazing things that I believe are in my future.
Yeah, that I love that. You talked about the parallels, because actually that's what I thought about too, the parallels between the career transition and then the life transition. Because I know, I'm non-clinical as well. And it does kind of, you do wonder, it makes you wonder, like, who am I now? Am
Yeah.
I still a doctor? What, just all of those things. How do you stay grounded in, I guess, who you are as you transition through these things? What are some of the tools that you were able to implement, or resources that you brought to bear as you navigated this transition?
Prayer, number one, probably number 1 through 5. Prayer, meditation, devotions. I really started reading devotionals. Even I would say a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, probably like 2020, actually, when the whole world was doing
Right.
what it was doing. I started reading devotionals, and that has helped to keep me grounded. Friends and family for sure. That has been a very key part of what keeps me grounded. And then, work like this. I mean, I think, the being able to not only learn myself from my trials, but also being able to help other people who are going through similar situations. I think that has been an amazing way. It's like it provides meaning to something that might otherwise just seem like a horrible life event. But when you're able to use that to have impact on other people, then it really reframes it. So I think that has been helpful. And then I also have been very intentional about spending time outdoors in nature. I used to sit in the house. I work from home. I've been working from home for 7 years. So initially I would just, I could be in the house, Dr. Sharita, for days. Like, because we don't get a
Yeah.
lot of mail. Most of the bills are paid electronically. So I could look up and be like, I haven't been outside in 3 days. But now I'm very intentional about going outside, sitting on my deck, taking a walk in the neighborhood and just making sure that I get fresh air, that I'm looking at the trees and the flowers and things like that. So those are some of the things that I would say have helped.
So prioritizing your self-care, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because I heard you mention the spa earlier,
Oh
that
yeah.
you were at a spa, and then you mentioned, these things being intentional about being outdoors. I also know you've done some traveling lately.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
all of those things. So prioritizing self-care, I guess for sure is one of those things that helps in a time of transition. What has been the feedback that you've gotten so far from the podcast and from sharing your story? Like what kinds, and I'm not, I'm in feedback for people who maybe are going through something similar. What kinds of impact
Yeah.
have you uncovered?
Oh my gosh. That has been, that has been and will continue to be my fuel. If I ever have a day where I'm tired or I'm not feeling like recording, the feedback has been honestly like overwhelming in the most positive way. From the very first episode, I would say multiple times a week, if not daily, Dr. Sharita, I get a Facebook message or an Instagram message or even a LinkedIn message because I had to close my eyes and hit submit, but I posted on LinkedIn. But I continue to get messages, emails, text messages, phone calls of people talking about the podcast. And these are women who many of whom are not divorced, which was my prayer because when I got this download, my what I thought I saw and what has been true is that I'm talking about my divorce experience. That was my divine disruption, but it can be a lot of things. It can be loss of a job. It could be, death and grief and loss. And I'm hearing from women that are like, you know what? I'm happily married, but thank you so much for this podcast because I'm going through this other situation
Yeah.
and this has really blessed me. Or, I listened to this episode and like the episode Worthy. So many people reached out to me after that and they were like, oh my gosh, like because of
Yes.
you, I'm gonna book this first class trip, or I'm gonna do this,
Yes.
or I'm like, oh. So I'm just I'm so thankful, like so thankful that it's having the impact that it's having. It's the podcast will be 1 month old tomorrow, and we've already surpassed 1,200 downloads,
Wow.
more than 40 5-star ratings. People are leaving reviews. And so I'm just honestly like very humbled and very honored and just excited about the future of the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, it's an excellent podcast. And you
Thank
mentioned
you.
that episode Worthy. So I know
Yes.
I was one of those people who reached out to you
Yep.
after Worthy because we had just come back from the Grand Cayman retreat. And somehow I don't remember how we got on that conversation as a part of the retreat, but we talked about um I guess self-worth and just how you view yourself. And I was sharing with them that until recently, I had always been the kind of person who never tried to have the best thing. So I at the outset, I would, if there were two pieces of cake and one looked better than the other, I would take the one that looked not as good
Yeah.
or whatever. I always took the lesser of things. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know how I started doing that, but I know it's something that we as women often do. Somehow we just automatically relegate ourselves to something that's lower, something that's
Yes.
less than, when we're deserving of every good thing. And so that
Absolutely.
episode was really impactful for me as well. And I thought about that because actually, I actually had upgraded my flight to Grand Cayman.
Yes.
Before the episode, but because
Yes.
I've been having these conversations in my own head about, okay, you have to, start embracing better, things that
Yes.
are the good, and you deserve these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do. We do deserve these things. And like you said, as women, and especially as moms, we're used to making sure that everybody else is okay, right?
Yeah.
As wives, as moms, as even single women, I see that. And I
Mhm.
had to recognize that, like, wow, I've been doing this my whole life, downgrading, always downgrading. If it's like
Yes.
you said, if there's two options, okay, I'm gonna go with the lower one, the cheaper one, the lesser one.
Right.
No
So
more.
So you guys, we're talking, but we didn't explain to you what happened. So
Oh,
in Dr. Nicole's episode Worthy, she talks about her trip to Ghana and how she decided she was treating herself to a first class experience. So she talked about the experience of having the first class ticket and being in the Delta Lounge and all
yes.
of the things that went along with it, and just how beautiful and wonderful an experience it was for her, and just different and foreign. And so I
Right.
appreciated your vulnerability in that too, that you're in the lounge and you're trying to act like you're used to this, right?
Right. Exactly. Like, okay, this is normal. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So how can we as women start to do more of that? Like, I think part of it has to do with having an awareness,
Hmm.
recognizing that maybe we are settling for less. But how can we then start to incorporate little things to validate ourselves, I guess, to tell ourselves that, hey, I'm worth this. Even for
Yeah.
people, maybe you can't afford a first class
Hmm.
plane ticket, but what are some of the little things that you can do to let yourself know, hey, I see you and you're worthy?
Yeah, I love that you said, even if you don't have the money, because I don't want anybody to ever feel like you can only show yourself that you're worthy if you have a lot of money. There's free things that you can do. And so maybe you decide that you're going to take that 30-minute bath. Like you're going to actually
Yes.
soak in your bathtub and you're going to light some candles that smell good. And you're going to, if you have children, hey, I'm a pediatrician. Give them an iPad for 30 minutes. Put them in front of the screen for 30 minutes so that you can get your time. Or if you have a spouse or significant other, let them go handle the kids. So it can be little things like that. It really is not really about the money per se. It's really about the decision to prioritize yourself and to really acknowledge that you really are worthy of that. And I think we get conditioned to believe that that's selfishness, and so I think that's why many of us, including myself, we are not used to treating ourselves and things like that. And then for me, as I talked about in the episode, there was a whole scarcity mindset
Yes.
stemming from childhood and financial challenges and things like that. So we bring all of that baggage. So, like you said, Dr. Sharita, it really starts with awareness and intentionality. These are muscles that I'm continuing to grow. I still find myself, looking at options like, and I'm like, I have to tell myself, Nicole, no, like we don't do that
Yes.
anymore. And it doesn't mean that I'm always going to fly first class, right? It would be great. But it just means that I'm going to be conscious. Like I'm making a conscious decision that's not rooted in unworthiness. So if I decide that I'm not going to fly first class because maybe I don't feel like I can afford it that time or whatever, that's one thing. But for me to just be on autopilot where I'm regularly downgrading my experiences, that's the part that's not okay. So I think, having that awareness and then working the muscle, just like a physical muscle.
Yes.
You have to, you're not going to get guns in your arms if you're not lifting weights. And so we have to practice this. We have to make it a part of our daily practice.
So for you guys who are listening in, I want you to think about what you can do in the next week to to validate yourself, to show yourself some love and to show yourself that you're worthy. I think it's especially important at this time of the year because the holidays, while they're beautiful and they're wonderful, they can often be extremely stressful
Yeah.
for those who are mothers and caregivers and things like that, because there's just a lot of extra. There's this extra stuff to do, this extra cooking, extra cleaning, extra shopping, just extra. So think about what you're going to do, over this next week, and make it a part of your regular activities. So not just this week, but every week going forward. What is at least one thing that you can do for yourself? And it's not selfish; it's actually essential, that you can do for yourself, just to say, hey, I see you, I appreciate you, I love you, and you are worthy.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So we're almost out of time. Trying to think of what the last question might be. I guess I would say, I kind of segue into the holiday season. So for somebody who is navigating a transition, a pivot during this time, what's one of the what's the number one thing you think
Mm.
they should do or could do to help themselves to handle this better?
That's a great question, and one that I've been, navigating myself. I would say to consider abandoning some of the traditions. I think
Mm,
traditions are great, don't get me wrong, but when we attach ourselves to anything too tightly, whether it's a tradition, a person, a concept, an ideal, then that can become very unhealthy. And so if you are navigating a transition and your Thanksgiving didn't look the way it usually looked, or your Christmas or your Kwanzaa or your Hanukkah isn't going to look the way it usually looks, for whatever reason, we have to just embrace that and start to think about, how can I make a new transition? I mean, a new tradition. What is
yeah,
something new that I can do with my friends, with my family, or even with yourself? I think that's important. We have to learn how to let go of what was so that we can really step fully into a new season.
I love that. I love that. That's perfect. Well, thank you so much for doing me the honor of coming on and talking with me today. I always love talking with you. You have such great insights. And again, just the resilience and the fact that you I just feel like you take everything that you go through, you learn the lesson, and then you teach something to somebody else. And I think it takes a special person to do that. So thank you so much for sharing with us. You guys show Dr. Nicole some love in the comments. If you have questions for her, now would be the time to put them in. Like I said, I'm happy to give her questions after too. But again, thank you, Dr. Nicole, for coming on and for sharing. And I can't wait to see what this next chapter holds in
Thank
its entirety,
you.
because I'm excited about it.
Oh,
And and again, you guys check out the podcast. It is absolutely wonderful. I told her before we came on camera that she is a natural. She's
aw,
actually a natural at a lot of things, but she's definitely a natural at podcasting.
thank
So
you.
so
Thank you,
check it
Dr.
out.
Sharita. I appreciate. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to, you ask great questions, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to not only share my story, but also to reflect. You have my wheels turning. So I just always appreciate you and what you do. And thank you for allowing me to talk about the podcast. Your Next Chapter podcast, you all take a listen.
Yes, we'll put the link in the comments. And that's it for tonight. As I mentioned at the outset, if you guys weren't on in the beginning, that for those ladies who are here in the DMV, I will be hosting a brunch and vision board party on Saturday, January 4th at 11 a.m. It will be in Severn. Once you register, I'll send the exact address. But definitely check it out. We did one. This is actually our second annual. We did one last January, and we had a ball. The food was delicious, and we just had so much fun. There was so much laughter and, just the camaraderie. So it was a great time. If you're free that day, it's a great way to start your year. So that's it. Take care. Have a great night. We'll see you guys next week.